Controversy in Turkey regarding Hagia Sophia and Greece. Russia pushes its influence in the Middle East and its space, and coronavirus continues to act up, and a deep dive into Congo under Belgian occupation. This is the world at large, and we are Politics 1001.
Politics 1001.
What's up, everyone? My name is Josh.
My name is Ian.
And we are Politics 1001.
Yes, we are.
All right, so we have a lot to talk about today. Why don't we just jump right into it?
All right. So there seems to be a lot of problems in Turkey and Greece, as always. So why don't you update me and the audience on that?
So, yes, as we posted about a few days ago, Greek troops have been deployed on the border, and this has obviously caused a lot of controversy because Greece is obviously starting to possibly infiltrate the sovereignty of Turkish territory. And by moving their troops on the border, this has angered the Turkish government a lot right now. The Erdogan of Turkey has told Greece that they need to warn the Turkish government when Greece plans on expanding the Turkish border fence, when they plan on moving troops to the border, and of course, because obviously Turkey wants to be in on these decisions because they share a border.
Right.
And so Greece has decided that no, we're not really going to do that. We're going to deploy our troops because you continue to threaten us with immigrants. Mm-hmm. And immigrants are a huge problem in Turkey right now. The country is very in debt, and though they are slowly climbing out of it, they still do not have the economy to support thousands of immigrants, right. If not millions, which is what Turkey does have, millions. And Erdogan has threatened to flood these into the country, and a lot of analysts of this conflict have said that Turkey is using these immigrants as a political tool, and obviously that's not necessarily the best option.
No.
From a Greek perspective, that
right.
These immigrants are flooding into the country. And so Greece has deployed these troops, and they've called it, and I quote, an invasion of their sovereignty when their unemployment is already really high among ethnic Greeks. Mm-hmm. And so when you throw in all these immigrants, the country simply doesn't have the resources to support it, especially right now because the tourism industry, which is one of the biggest in Greece, is just non-existent right now.
Yeah.
They've opened up Greece has opened up travel from certain countries like Lebanon and Israel and a few European countries, but other than that, they're very, very shut down. So Turkey has accused Greece of being inhumane towards migrants trying to seek a better life, because Greece continues to be very strict on who can come into the border, and they often use lethal firearms to stop the immigrants if they try to flood.
Really?
Yeah, which has given Turkey the excuse to call them inhumane and call them a terrible state towards immigrants, when in reality, according to a lot of analysts, Greece is just trying to protect themselves from immigrants that they can't afford to shelter. Mm-hmm. And so this is going on, but what's going on inside Turkey is a lot more interesting. Erdogan's approval rating has been dropping a lot recently. It's
because of coronavirus?
Because of coronavirus. Okay. Coronavirus approval ratings are extremely low, and this is not uncommon among many world leaders. Bolsonaro in Brazil and Donald Trump in the United States, their approval ratings have dropped a little bit, not a lot, but they have dropped, and this has started to scare these politicians into taking more drastic measures to support their base. And Erdogan is no exception to this. He has decided to hold a Quran reading on the day that Constantinople, or now modern day Istanbul, was conquered by the Ottoman Empire, taking it away from the Eastern Roman capital. And they converted Hagia Sophia, which was the biggest church in the city, into a mosque upon entering the city. And it was used as a mosque throughout Ottoman times, but when Ataturk took over and made Turkey into a secular state, he decided to turn Hagia Sophia into a museum, and Hagia Sophia from there on out has acted as such and has become a UNESCO heritage site, in which people of all religions can come and visit. For the first time in 85 years since this happened, Erdogan has decided to hold a mosque, Quran reading in there, and that's not necessarily a good perspective from Greece, because Greece is a very religious country, and they have denounced this, and they've said this is terrible, and they're trying to destroy the status of Hagia Sophia as a UNESCO heritage site.
This was supposed to be a secular site for people of all religions to go to.
Yes, and so Greece has denounced this, and a lot of people think Erdogan's doing this because all of the radical Islamists, a lot of them in the country tend to support Erdogan, and so a lot of people think he's trying to rile up his base. So that could be what's happening. Erdogan might just also want to hold prayers in the Hagia Sophia. We don't really know. Yeah. But the backlash is actually pretty extreme from this, and it's still happening today. So I'm going to read you guys a quote from what Greece said and then how Turkey responded. So this was Greece's original reaction to this. Quote, "We call once again on Turkey to respect its international obligations and to stop subordinating its highly honorable role in internal affairs as the custodian of such an important monument as Hagia Sophia, which belongs to all mankind." Telling
fiery statement right there.
Yeah, so
words
Greece,
are said.
So Greece just lashed out at this. So Turkey was pretty angry, naturally, and they responded with this, and I quote, "The fact that Greece, the only remaining European country without a mosque in its capital, is disturbed by the recital of the Holy Quran in the Hagia Sophia, in a case in point illustrating the intolerant psychology of this country, especially at a time when calls to prayer can be heard from the minarets in Europe, and the importance of the principle of mutual respect is increasingly valued." So obviously Turkey is saying, look, Greece, you are obviously very intolerant of our religion, and you need to stop doing so. And then by saying this, you're really not helping your cause as the humane people in this conflict, which Greece takes the stance as being.
So they're seeing their actions as being a part of their culture, and Greece is trying to, is not valuing that, and they see them as not respecting that.
Well, so inside the Hagia Sophia, there's a lot of paintings of ancient Christian art, which was covered up by the Ottomans, but still there. And so Greece says that the Christians have just as much a claim to the now museum as the Turks do, the Muslim Turks. And so they're saying it is a UNESCO heritage site. You need to respect that because you can't just deny people entry because they're not Muslims. But that is Greece's stance. Turkey is just obviously saying, well, we can because we own it, and it is a Muslim holiday, and so we are allowed to do that. So obviously this has spiked a lot of controversy from all over the world. A lot of hardcore Christians and Muslims on both sides have defended the actions of both Greece and Turkey in response to this and the broader conflict between the two countries.
Right.
So a lot going on there.
It's kind of interesting how something seemingly as innocent as reading a text in a museum can spark such an outcry.
Yes, it does.
It's kind of interesting.
But
really
Turkey
highlights the conflict and what both sides think of each other.
Yeah, the tensions. They're always finding ways to get at each other.
Right.
Which is always fun, I guess, in geopolitics.
It could be fun. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, speaking of getting at each other for each other's actions, we have Russia and the
Josh,
U.S.
What did you do to me?
You're
talking about
not now. Okay. Russia and the United States. Russia.
You're telling me Russia and the United States are having a conflict?
Oh God. Oh no. Well, not really. It's definitely not as extreme as possible nuclear war, but they're definitely having a conflict nonetheless. Russia is a little bit jealous that the United States launched a rocket up to the space station, which happened yesterday as of recording this podcast, and they have kind of been verbally sparring online, the foreign ministries of each country. Russia has emphasized that it's no big deal that the United States managed to launch a rocket, and they said that all they did is send people up to the space station. We've done it before, not a big deal.
All the time.
But Trump is saying this as his big. He's saying that the launch of the space station is part of a more grand plan to actually eventually colonize Mars, but obviously that's very far away. Trump has promised to get to the moon permanently by 2024, and he's trying to use this launch as a jumping point to get to the moon, and from there use the moon as a platform to get to Mars and colonize it. He wants to colonize the moon by 2024 also, not just get there. So maybe that's possible, but this is all part of Trump's new Space Force.
He also has to get reelected for that to be possible.
He does have to get reelected. About a 50-50 shot, in my opinion, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyways, the main issue with why Russia is jealous is not only because the U.S. is once again showing space superiority, but also because Russia originally had a monopoly on ferrying astronauts up to the space station. And they've been doing that for a while, and they've been making a lot of money and profiting off of it. But
there's a lot of people who want to go to space.
Yeah, a lot of astronauts. That is what they do. Well, maybe some people would, Ian.
I'm just stating my opinion.
Okay. And Russia's kind of lost their monopoly on that. It was about $80 million in profit that they're losing because the U.S. is now also able to ferry astronauts up to the moon, up to the space station, and
Not quite the moon yet.
yeah, and so unlucky for Russia. Most Western countries, which are the ones launching rockets, will likely pick the United States over Russia when all is said and done. So, anyways, obviously that's going on, but Russia is also trying to increase its influence in the Middle East. And the Middle East, especially in Syria, which is what I am specifically referring to when I say the Middle East, is embroiled in a civil war. And that civil wars are not very fun, and it's caused a lot of immigrants.
No, Josh, I do not think.
No, they're not. And it has caused a lot of immigrants. Okay, Ian. It has caused a lot of immigrants to go up to Turkey, and hence it's also caused the problem between Turkey and Greece now. So a little bit of a chain effect in our podcast today.
Yeah.
And so Russia's trying to increase their presence in Syria by wanting to install more military bases throughout the country. Syria will likely submit to this request because they really need Russia as an ally. Bashar al-Assad is starting to not retain as much control over the country in terms of political power. He's become unpopular even among his closest allies. Iran has expressed some distaste for Bashar al-Assad, and Iran is a really close funder of the Syrian government. So that's going on. Russia's trying to increase their influence, and also this is also because the United States has pulled out of Syria, and well, when one superpower leaves, another one's got to come in and replace it.
Leaves a power vacuum.
It does leave a power vacuum. And Russia, well, they love them some power vacuums. And so
Yummy.
Yummy power vacuums.
Is that a direct quote from Putin?
Yummy.
Yummy.
Okay, so oh my god. So awesome. Another thing that's going on with Russia is Donald Trump has decided that he's going to host a G7 summit in Washington, D.C. And the G7 is just a group of countries that get together and discuss global affairs. And one of the members of the G7 is Germany. And Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, has very promptly rejected Trump's offer to come to D.C. because she doesn't want to set a bad example or spread the virus. Those were some of the reasons released by Berlin. But nevertheless, this kind of made Trump a little angry. And that Germany would reject his offer like that because he's inviting them.
Nobody likes it when you invite your friend to tea and they don't show up.
Yeah,
Josh has done it for me a few times.
Yeah, well,
let's just say
Ian's tea is a little old.
How can tea be old?
It's old. I mean, it's kind of the definition of old. But anyways, Angela Merkel rejected the offer of Trump. And so Trump, obviously a little angry, decided, well, we're going to invite Putin instead. Russia is not a member. Putin is the president of Russia, if you didn't know. And Russia is not a member of the G7, but Trump invited him anyways because got to fill that power vacuum, which was Germany in this case. And Russia loves filling power vacuums.
We've already talked about that.
But I'm not sure if Russia accepted. I don't think they have yet. Putin might accept. There's a lot of reasons for why he would and wouldn't, but what it comes down to is Trump just wants someone there, and he's just mad that Merkel didn't go in Germany.
Right.
And so he's decided that this is his way of fixing the problem, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's happening.
And I imagine that Germany wouldn't like it that Putin is taking their place because they didn't decide to show up.
That might make Germany a little angry because they're trying to set an example, obviously.
Yeah.
But in the end, Germany is very stubborn about going. Like, they do not want to go. And so I don't really think they'll care that much.
Right.
But they might. I don't really know what they think. But anyways, we also kind of have the coronavirus going on.
Yeah. Why don't you update me on the coronavirus? While I've been in quarantine, I've been ignoring the news because it's just so depressing.
Yeah, coronavirus is very depressing.
Yeah.
And other stuff going on right now. And so let's look at Vietnam. We're going to go over to Vietnam. Vietnam is actually in a very interesting situation. They've had a total of 328 cases total of coronavirus and have had 0 deaths total. And
wow.
Yeah, which is
good for them.
Very impressive. They have a country of 97 million people. So their total number of cases itself, which again is 328, is impressive alone. But 0 deaths is very interesting. So a lot of analysts have wondered why. And when looking into it, originally the World Health Organization and China both insisted that the coronavirus cannot be spread by human human-to-human contact. And Vietnam didn't really believe that, and they locked down anyways, and they didn't ban, but they stopped flights from China, people coming from China, from just coming into their country. They had to get temperature checked when they got there, when they got to whatever airport they landed in Vietnam. And temperature screenings were available for all international flights, which, of course, stopped people who were sick from getting into Vietnam, because Vietnam knew, being really close to China, that they could be a very big target of that, just as some of the neighboring countries of China were.
Yeah.
And furthermore, speaking of the WHO, actually, the United States has cut off ties with the WHO, which...
Really? Why?
Well, so Donald Trump thinks that the WHO is a Chinese puppet. That's a word he's used, and this has really split the United States. A lot of people are saying, well, yeah, the WHO is actually very heavily influenced by China, and China is not the freest nation, so it makes sense that Trump should cut off in aid and relations with a nation that is not democratic, with an organization that's run by a non-democratic nation, and debatably the U.S.'s biggest ally in the world right now, enemy, and so biggest enemy in the world.
I was gonna say something, but then.
Yeah. So this
You're
is
the expert. I'm supposed to trust you.
I correct myself, and so this has really, really split the American populace and the world in general, because even though a lot of people are saying, well, if you're going to do that, don't do it during the coronavirus, because the WHO is the World Health Organization and they're pretty important right now.
Right.
But the United States is doing decently well for itself right now in terms of per capita deaths, and Trump just doesn't think it's necessary to work with them and instead spend the aid money to the WHO on, well, themselves.
Yeah, that's tricky situation right there.
Yep, and moving on, Brazil has the 4th most coronavirus deaths in the world right now.
Wow.
They moved up rapidly. Deaths are rapidly increasing, and at an exponential rate. And Bolsonaro in Brazil has started to become a lot more silent about that. He's dealing with some different things right now. He's launched some investigations, and he's not really worrying about,
for what?
He's not worrying about coronavirus right now.
What are the investigations for?
The investigations, well, it's a variety of different things really, but he's started to jump. He's kind of distracted right now. There's a lot of people who want to call him out, who are calling him out for his handling of the virus, because Bolsonaro was very open about not locking down during the coronavirus and not wearing masks. He's held with rallies with thousands of people attending about anti-lockdown protests. And so Bolsonaro is kind of investigating his critics and saying that a lot of them are politically driven to destroy him. And so, yeah, Bolsonaro is kind of distracted right now. So he's staying kind of quiet about that. But in the end, Brazil has moved up to the 4th most amounts of deaths in the world.
Also, as we mentioned earlier, his approval ratings have dropped.
Yes, they have. Because obviously Brazil's getting absolutely hit by the coronavirus, and Bolsonaro is very anti-lockdown and still is vocal about it. So we'll see what happens there.
That's all we can do.
Yep.
Wait and see, and then talk about it later.
Yes, very wise, Ian.
Yep.
And so we'll go to the Middle East right now to look at coronavirus over there. In Israel, coronavirus cases have gone back on the rise after dropping for a few days.
Really?
The Israeli government has been praised for their very good handling of the virus.
What have they done?
They've been tracking people who have had it, and they have also gone on very, very strict lockdown. The country is very densely populated too, with millions and millions of people living in Israel for a very, very small part. 1/6 of 1% of the Middle East is the amount of land they take up. So it's a very small amount, and they've still managed to do very well about this. But
that's good.
Netanyahu gave a very emotional speech, the Prime Minister of Israel, about how he loves seeing Israelis sunbathe, but it's time for people to get over themselves and start social distancing again. And then
kind of funny.
They can keep opening up the economy as long as people do that. He said he does not want to resort to locking down once again. Well, also going on in the Middle East is Lebanon is just going through a very terrible situation right now economically. They're in the worst economic situation of the 21st century, and their crisis is not really seeming like it's going to fix itself in the future anytime soon. And because of this, according to Al Jazeera, a news source located in Doha, Qatar, over 50% of Lebanon is currently below the poverty line, which is very scary. And
Yes.
though the Lebanese parliament has approved aid for low-income families, it nevertheless does not take away from the overlying fact that 50% of Lebanon is in poverty, and it's very hard
crazy.
right now, especially with lockdowns. It's not exactly a way to really get a job.
No.
Because Lebanon was going through an economic crisis before the coronavirus, but this has just made it a lot worse.
Yeah. The economic problems related to coronavirus has made it worse, it seems.
Yes, it has, because a lot of businesses have not been allowed to open, and so job opportunities are already a very low amount.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's not good. Hopefully they fix themselves in the future. Lebanon has continued to elect a new government, so we'll see how they do, how they handle it. It's probably going to take a few years to get out of this hole that they've dug for themselves.
Damn.
Little lighter, might be the wrong word, Ian, because we are
no.
talking about the Belgian occupation of Congo.
Oh, no.
Belgian occupation of Congo. Well, very controversial. A lot of people think that this was a very terrible event in history, and it's really hard to argue against that, really.
Kind of seems like it was.
Yeah. And this, again, was a topic requested by you guys. If you want to request a topic, feel free to DM us with any historical topic you want us to discuss. We discuss a historical topic at the end of every single poll, every single podcast.
Podcasts.
Yeah.
They both begin with P's.
Yeah, that's why it's confusing. So, Belgium took over the Congo, but it was a little different from the normal European colonization because the Congo ended up being the personal property of, at the time, King Leopold of Belgium.
So he bought it as his own private land.
He bought it and he kind of ran his own business, and he had a 16,000 strong African mercenary army that he hired of locals, and they were led by 350 European officers from Belgium, and a little bit from all over Europe, but a lot of them were Belgian. And so, yeah, it was not a colony like all the territories around it, but it was, like I said, the personal property of King Leopold himself.
Which makes it different and unique. And
it means that a lot of Belgian laws didn't actually have to apply there because it was personal property, so the government really didn't have much say in what happened over there.
Right.
And King Leopold was actually very strongly criticized all over Europe for his terrible treatment of the local Congolese people, which is very rare because it's not like the other countries are in a very good situation. So you know how it was bad when he's receiving criticism for how he treated them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when you... That's like, am I the bad guy situation?
Yeah. But it probably made Britain feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, we're not the worst.
Yeah.
And so half of Congo approximately was killed during this reign of Leopold, which was 44 years. And that is 10 million people out of the 20 million people living there.
From 1865 to 1909, to be clear.
Yep.
For our history buffs out there.
Yep. 1909 is when Leopold died. And so what was happening in Congo, what made it so bad is that people were exploited for things. And going into the 20th century, rubber started to become a very, very valuable resource. Obviously, it was being utilized a lot more. And Leopold knew this, and because it was his own private property, he decided to exploit the people there to export rubber and make himself rich and benefit off of it personally. And so rubber started to be exported at a rapid rate. But the people who were getting rubber, they weren't exactly in the best of conditions because he needed someone to do it for him.
And he was getting the native population.
The native Congolese civilians.
Right.
They had to meet a local quota. They were very high and unreasonable a lot of the time, with the threat of their wives and children being beaten or killed if they didn't, or raped. And this was obviously very scary for the people who were there.
So they were forced to get rubber, which is not an easy task. You're going into the jungle to get it.
It's not.
So that's where rubber's found.
It was very, very scary for them.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, the Belgian soldiers, the 16,000 strong mercenary army, enforced Leopold's rules. And they weren't the most humane of rules. The main rule that they had to follow was that ammunition was very limited there because it had to be exported there. And so because of that, the soldiers were required to meet certain quotas when they used a bullet. In this case, the quota was a hand. That is no figurative language. They had to bring a hand for every single bullet that they shot.
Wow.
Because theoretically, when
a hand from just a random Congolese?
So
their own hands.
So they're assuming that when a bullet is being shot, Leopold was assuming this, when a bullet is being shot, that they'd end up killing the person that they were shooting at, and so when the person died, they would just cut off their hand. But the rule was they had to bring a hand for every bullet they shot. And so a lot of the time, when bullets went off by accident or the soldiers missed, that they had to bring a hand for every single bullet used, which ended up with a lot of people losing one or both of their hands, which in turn actually decreased the rubber exports because, well, they had one hand or no hands. So they couldn't really meet those quotas, meaning that more people were killed and more people starved.
Right.
And poverty was very, very rampant throughout here.
So they're already dying from getting the rubber, right?
Already dying from getting the rubber, terrible working conditions. Poverty was very rampant.
And they had these awful laws, clearly.
Yep. So there was a lot of brutality going on there.
Would you call this a genocide?
Genocide? Also, a lot of historians do refer to it as a genocide.
Right.
Because obviously it was very targeted against the Congolese people.
Because I think that's where the controversy comes in, whether you can call it
a genocide, or not, and the fact that they were slaves.
Right.
It's
bad. It's bad nonetheless. Really bad.
That's true. And so many historians and people of both blame this era of Belgian Congolese history as the biggest reason for the seemingly unrelenting war in Congo that we see today, with all the different military groups and foreign mercenaries going there to make a profit, just fighting each other. And it's the Congo is a very unstable nation right now. It's considered one of the least safe in the world. If you travel there, it is recommended that you stay in the capital city, Kinshasa, and that you do not leave because it's extremely dangerous.
Wow.
So that's kind of what's going on right now. It doesn't seem like the situation is going to end anytime soon, and Congo is just very kind of a mess right now. The central government doesn't have much control.
Yeah.
So it's sad.
It is a sad situation.
It is. But
it's awful.
Hopefully it'll fix itself in the future. And again, that stemmed from King Leopold of Belgium, which was our historical topic today.
Cool.
All right, so now,
I guess not cool, but
if you follow our account on Instagram called Politics1001, you can search that up on Instagram to find us. And
give us a follow while you're there.
Give us a follow, like some posts, which you should also do on YouTube, by the way. You want to subscribe down below, share this with a friend. We love that. Makes us so happy when you do that.
Makes me smile.
Yeah. Ian doesn't smile that much either, so you want to see him smile. So anyways, we've done a lot of polls. We do a poll every other day on our account, but for this week, we are going to cover the 3 most recent ones. So the most recent poll that we've put up is if the black community deserves reparations for their past treatment by their white colonizers, or if they were slaves. And 29% of you have said yes, while 71% of you have said no.
And a lot of you voted, over 2,000.
Yeah. Thousands of you voted. We can check that exact statistic, but in the meantime, why do people say yes, Ian, you think?
Well, obviously throughout our history, or American history, when I say our, the African Americans or the black community in general have had a really tough history since the slave trade in the 1600s. They put on plantations and put through horrible work. They were whipped and all that. And then after the Civil War, when the slaves were finally freed, we had an era of Jim Crow, segregation, all that, where people were put into communities out to separate them from whites, and oftentimes those communities were worse off and did not give them the opportunities necessary.
Yep.
Now Jim Crow is thankfully gone, but there's questions over the lingering effects of those actions by our government and whether we should give money to them to make sure they are at an equal standing to live up to the values that we originally wanted when we founded in the country and freed the slaves.
Yep, and when Ian says, of course, he already said this, but we're not just talking about the United States here. Every single European country was a lot more racist back then than they were today, and that's just a fact. And obviously, people do argue, like Ian said, that they were put at a disadvantage because of how they were treated, and that's why black communities are so poor today. And so 71% of you said no to this, that reparations shouldn't be given. So why do you think that is, Ian?
Well, there's a lot of questions that come up. Like, we are so many years removed. There is not many people alive who even remember Jim Crow. So how do we decide who pays the reparations, who gets the reparations? Because there are plenty of people in this country who came over post Jim Crow. Like my family, for instance, came over in the early 20th century and had nothing to do with slavery or Jim Crow. And even there's black families who came over after this from Africa.
Yeah.
So the question is, who do we pay? How do we get this money in the first place? And would it even help anything? You're giving people free money, basically. So there's similar arguments to that out there against welfare and whatnot about giving people money.
Yep, and also people believe that it's not really right because most people believe that Africans nowadays are on equal standing with the white population and every other race. Every race is treated equally.
Right.
And so there's really no reason for it because the actions of the past do not affect the future. In a case like this is what a lot of people argue. And so that is our first poll. Our second one is should more countries in general use military aggression against drug cartels? And this applies a lot more to North America and South America than it does in Europe, but it still is very present in Europe, very present in the Middle East and Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so 82% of you said yes, while
Wow.
18% of you said no. So the main argument for yes, or why we should use military aggression against drug cartels, is that drug cartels are very, very violent and they disrupt communities. They often insert influence in the government where they're not wanted, and they force people to work for them by taking away their food or threatening their families and forcing them to work for them in return for them not getting killed. And most people argue that's very inhumane, it's not right, and that's quite honestly disgusting.
Right.
And that countries should use their militaries because a lot of the military is just not doing anything anyways. And drug cartels are just a big problem that's deeply rooted in society, and military force is the only option to actually get rid of them because they're not going to go away voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you who have said no believe that drug cartels do not need to be defeated militarily. The most common argument is that just by legalizing all drugs, the cartels will just be put out of business if the government exports and sells them at a cheaper cost than what the drug cartels can afford to do. And that will naturally just destroy the drug cartels instead of having to battle them militarily.
There's also questions about how effective like the war on drugs has been in the past and whether it has led to more instability. Can you fight fire with fire?
Yes, exactly. And people think the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why 18% of you voted no.
Right.
So that was our other poll. Our last poll for this last week has been, do you think capitalism was founded on evil morals?
Ooh.
24% of you.
And this was a suggestion from one of our followers, I believe.
Yep. And 24, and if you want to suggest that poll, just please DM us. We are happy to take them. We
or
always
email us.
always need ideas. Yep. And what's our email again?
ourfacts82@gmail.com.
Send it right there. You just go on our profile, click email, it'll do it all for you.
Mm-hmm.
So 24% of you said yes, capitalism is founded on evil morals, while 76% of you said no. So, yes, why do you think, Ian?
Well, 24% of you said yes. A lot of people follow the idea that capitalism is inherently evil because it leads to exploitation and does not give people control over their labors and leads to a few people with greedy motivations, and they see greed as evil, exploiting people, and they see that as inherently bad. And they also point out things like colonialism and all that stuff.
Yeah, and they think when it's not fair for someone to hoard all the money while
Right.
Millions don't have nearly as much.
Exactly. They see it as inherently unequal, which perhaps is evil.
And they want a more equal society where money is distributed more fairly.
Yeah.
And so 76% of you said no, capitalism is not founded on evil morals. Why do you think that is, Ian?
Well, for those of you who don't know, because this is a lesser known fact, the person who founded capitalism, Adam Smith, he wasn't writing from an evil perspective. He just wanted a way for nations to become more wealthy and fix the other system, mercantilism, beforehand. And they say, well, that's a good thing. People are making money, which is true. Capitalism has led to innovation, has allowed us to record this podcast, you could argue, and because of that, we are now more prosperous than any time in our history because of the capitalism, and they see that as not evil. Well, maybe that's a good thing.
Yep. And again, founded on evil morals is the question here. And people who started capitalism, which has really, it's hard to argue when it officially started because it's kind of always existed in terms of currency exchange for goods. But most people think, well, I mean, it was founded on good intentions to give each other stuff, and make sure that people benefit from it.
Right.
So that is our last poll of today.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very fun recording this. We love doing it.
So fun.
Yeah.
I learned a lot today. I hope you did too.
Yep. And it took us a few tries to get this started because we just want this to be perfect for you guys.
Yeah.
And we hope you think that. But as usual, you can leave in the comments or DM us if you have any criticism of anything we've done on this entire podcast.
Mm-hmm. You guys are very vocal sometimes.
Yeah, and we love it. So
sometimes.
Yeah. Follow it. So you can follow us again on our Instagram page. That is Politics1001. You can search us up. You can obviously follow us on YouTube. Please subscribe if you can.
Yep.
You can spare it. It takes 2 seconds. It makes us happy. Again, puts a smile on Ian's face.
It does.
You can also find us on Spotify. Search us up, Politics1001 again. The World at Large is what we're called. It's a guy drinking coffee in a blue square.
2 guys drinking coffee.
2 guys drinking coffee. Ian made the logo.
I did.
And so...
You can criticize my graphic design skills. I know Josh has.
And so... yeah.
Right, that's all we got.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys have a great day, and keep on thinking.
Adios.